Deaf people of Reddit. What are some things you thought were silent but later found out they weren't? So after I got hearing aids, I was amazed that escalators made noise. I stopped my wife from getting on one because it was so loud that I thought it was broken. Vending machines make way too much noise, especially soda machines. Weirdest was that I didn't realize that people can hear things that are behind them. This tripped me out so much because I think I relied so much on visual cues. Like you could stand behind me and talk and I'd have no idea you were there or what you were saying. Next story. I was deaf as a real little kid and I would scream all the time. Nobody knew for a while, so my teachers were always mad at me, but I never knew why. Then I heard myself and realized 3-year-old screams make you want to hurt something. Next story. My best friend is deaf. He also has 2 older brothers who are deaf. When they were growing up, the 2 older brothers thought their mom was magic because whenever she went to the front door, someone was always outside. It's like she could summon someone there whenever she wanted. The 2 brothers would try everything, day after day, to try and see if they could make someone appear at the front door. Their mom asked them why they were messing with the front door so much, and they said that they were trying to figure out how she makes people appear at the front door. They begged her to show them the trick of how she did it. So she opened the front door, took them outside, turned them around and said, "See this button? That's called a doorbell. When someone comes to the door, they push it and it makes a sound inside. Then I go to the door and I let them in." It was the biggest mind-blowing moment for them, and it's a classic story in their family. Okay, this story was absolutely adorable. I loved it, and I had 4 different options for videos to record for today, but I chose this one because in all my time, I've never done any deaf videos or deaf stories, so this is new for me. This is fun. This is exciting. Also, there's been a lot of ghost stories recently, and that's spooked the hell out of me. Anyway, next story. So, I lived with a deaf roommate. His family was generationally deaf, parents, siblings, etc. Some things he learned as my roommate are, pots and pans are loud AF. Vacuum cleaners make lots of noise, especially at 3 a.m. Running water from a tap left on again makes sound. Things I learned, to put in earplugs before turning on his car. Pacing in my bedroom makes enough vibration to wake someone up. And ASL is a full damn language and super cool. Next story. Not deaf, but in high school I took ASL classes. My teacher went to Gallaudet University and lived in the dorms. She was hearing. After a semester or 2, she visited home and was awake late one night making some food in the kitchen. Her mom got up and basically yelled, "What the hell are you doing?" My teacher realized she was slamming cupboards and cabinets and being loud in general. Funny how absence of sound makes you louder. Next story. My grandma is 82 and has been losing her hearing steadily for like 10 years, and it's basically completely gone now. When I was growing up, she was constantly humming a tune. She still does, and it sounds terrible. I think she probably didn't realize she's doing it. My poor grandma. She's taking it pretty hard, but I love her so much. Next story. Had a teacher with deaf parents, and we asked him something similar to this. He had to explain to them, when he was a grown adult, that farting in public was rude. That was the first time ever that anyone had told them that farts have sound. Still baffles me to this day that nobody thought to warn them that everyone could hear them rip one off. Next story. Deaf kid at a deaf school here, but I'm probably the one with the most residual hearing. And the absolute worst thing is when deaf from birth people don't get that dragging a metal chair over a tile floor is absolutely horrendous. When one of the mostly deaf kids does that, all of the people who have some hearing left are just slowly dying. Next story. After I got tubes in my ears, I was startled by so many things. The hospital toilet whose flush was like the roar of an enormous beast. The refrigerator which clicked on like it came to life in my presence, or dropped a cacophony of ice cubes without warning just to warn me away if I got too close. Then came the electronics from the 90s that had high-pitched whines. Ugh. Next story. Growing up deaf, I just quickly learned to assume that effing everything makes a sound. It's just a matter of how loud. I've no way of knowing how loud a thing is, so I try to be gentle in my movements, because I know that smashing something into something else is going to be loud. You know, crap like that. Next story. Not deaf, but once in my ASL class there was a giant cockroach. Someone stomped on it and all of the students visibly cringed. My professor was amazed when we explained the crunch sound that you make when you squish them. Next story. I have several deaf cousins. One is in her 30s and just found out sirens make different noises. She thought her son was some kind of psychic genius because he would tell her an ambulance was coming or a fire truck or a police car. My other cousin is in high school. She has had several surgeries. Plus, she recently got some upgraded hearing aids, so she is hearing more than ever before. She now hates the beach though because the sound of the waves is stressful. Also, her opinion of different songs has changed. Before, she would listen to them by feeling them, like through the vibrations, and now she can actually hear them. Adam Levine in Maroon 5 is now super annoying, but it turns out she likes George Harrison more than she thought she would. Next story. I started gaining weight from university stress, and I didn't know thighs made a chafing sound or a clicking sound from inner thigh seams shuffling against each other. I have to remind myself that I am making noises in the kitchen when I want a late night snack because I am usually not wearing my hearing aids when I'm at home. They give me terrible feedback because of my long hair. Then I had read descriptions of birds tweeting in the early mornings from closed captioning of TV shows or when I read novels. I didn't experience it myself until I upgraded my hearing aids a while ago, and I asked my roommate, "What's that echoing high-pitched sound in the mornings? It reminds me of a whistling song." Then the T in listen is considered silent, but I still pronounce the T. I'm going to pronounce every letter in a word unless I'm corrected, which has led to some interesting discoveries, such as Chevrolet. The CH is apparently pronounced more like a sh, so I was saying Chevy with a hard CH, similar to saying chicken. English is awful, and it's my main language. Continuing, I have a profound sensorineural hearing loss, and hearing aids help me hear very well, but there is a difference between hearing and understanding a noise. Yes, I hear you, but no, I don't understand you. I hear chaotic noise all the time with ha's and need a visual to understand the noise I'm hearing. Next story. I hung out one night with a couple who was deaf. Their dog snored so loudly. I pointed it out to them and they chatted with each other talking about their snoring dog. They had no idea that the dog snores. One of them knew about snoring, but the other didn't even understand snoring in general. It was adorable and interesting. They put their hand under the other's nose to make it clear that the dog was snoring. Next story. My friend got dual cochlear implants and she was amazed that she could hear a plane even though it was so far away. Also, she burst in on her son peeing because she heard his pee in the toilet. And then hearing the ocean blew her mind because the sound was everywhere, and she couldn't pinpoint a single source. Next story. My buddy is a retired EOD tech and pretty damn deaf. The VA gave him some hearing aids and it took him a while to get used to sounds that he hadn't heard in a while. One that made me laugh was he was mid-sentence in a story and as we were driving down the road, a small rock came up and hit the window. It didn't crack the window, but made a slight click sound. He stopped and was like, "What the F was that? What was that noise?" And then I said to him, "A small rock hit the window." And he says, "Oh, haven't heard that crap in a while." Next story. Being hard of hearing myself with mostly high-frequency hearing loss, the rightmost keys on a piano and the sonic screwdriver from Doctor Who. For the longest time, I thought those keys on my grandparents' piano were broken because I couldn't hear them. Turns out that's how my parents learned that I was hard of hearing from a young age. Next story. Clocks. When I first got activated in 1999, one of the first sounds I heard was a clock ticking. My speech pathologist and I were having our first session until I finally asked what that ticking noise was. I remember it being annoying. After we figured out it was the clock, I realized I had a world of different sounds to learn. It was a big moment for me. Okay, so imagine this. A deaf person gets implants or hearing aids or something like that and can hear now. And the first voice they hear is Morgan Freeman's. They would have no frame of reference. They wouldn't know that the voice of God is speaking to them. They would just say, "Oh, cool, I can hear you now." And what about the inverse? What if somebody's first voice that they hear is like the Valley Girl accent with the vocal fry? That would be horrible. If that was the first thing that I heard, I wouldn't want to go back to being deaf. I'm just going to be honest. I hate that accent, and nobody talks like that, really. Anyway, next story. So, not deaf, but about 20 years ago, I went to the doctor suspecting my hearing was impaired. He pulled 2 huge chunks of goo out of my ears. Just filth from the festivals that I'd gone to, mixed with sweat. In other words, intense earwax and almond-sized dark brown glue. Afterwards, my hearing just attacked me. It was so intense I had to go and sit in the library for some hours to adjust. I got a comic book to read, and every time I turned a page, I could hear the pages cut the air. It was so surreal. And funny side note, after pulling the almonds from my ears, I asked my doctor what other things he had pulled from people's ears. He said one time a patient complained about hearing loss, and when the doctor examined what kind of He said one time a patient complained about hearing loss, and when the doctor examined with a kind of binocular, he was shocked to find a moth and it crawled backwards into the patient's ear and died. First thing the doctor saw was the face of the moth just staring at him. Next story. Yo, this is my thread. I just found out I have a moderate profound hearing loss in high frequencies, so here's a list of things. My cherry blue keyboard, sorry to everybody that I live with. Birds, they are loud. My keys, clothes rustling when you put them on. Then, not that I didn't hear it, but I didn't realize how loud it was. Paper crinkling. My microwave beeping, water pouring into a glass, people talking in another room where I can't see them. That one was a big discovery. List can be continued as I continue to adjust to my new hearing aids. Next story. Dated a deaf girl in college. Everyone in the entire dorm knew that we had sex. I didn't know how to bring it up in polite conversation. Also, because deaf people don't tend to get audible feedback, everything they do is super loud. They slam doors, wash dishes really noisily. Just everything is loud. Next story. I'm not deaf myself, but I read a comment on this very subreddit where a man and his girlfriend were out on a date, and he farted super loud like 7 times. Poor bastard didn't know that farts made noise, and he embarrassed himself, and his girlfriend in a fancy restaurant too. Feels bad, man. Next story. Have a friend who recently got implants and went from 80% deaf to having superhuman hearing. She's amazed that everything makes sound. It was hilarious to tell her that the thing she just heard was upstairs neighbor dropping something on their floor. It blew her mind that she could be aware of the world beyond her vision in real time. The funny part is when she said my sound is broken. I grew up in a 4-story Victorian house and learned to ninja walk over the squeaky wooden floors in order to be up after bedtime. In our neighborhood, we got kids together to play stealthy-based games at 1 a.m. I just move silently and am generally a quiet, relaxed kind of man. I'm not a particularly tiny guy and have a rather notable visual presence, so it's hilarious to see how confusing I am to her new sense. Next story. I've had severe headaches my whole life that have resulted in many sets of tubes and a reconstruction of an eardrum. The thing that always struck me odd is tinnitus. Doctors would always be surprised that I didn't complain of ringing in my ears. It was during the Dolby surround sound phase of the 90s that I was watching a movie with my husband when an explosion occurred on the screen. It then muted the voices and created a high-pitched whine, and I cringed, and I described it as loud silence. He didn't understand. He said, "The ringing?" I said, "What ringing?" He said, "Who's on first?" It took a while to work out that loud silence was ringing, or better known as tinnitus. Apparently, I've had that my whole life. I thought silence was a constant, high-pitched, constant tone. I was close to 40 figuring that out, and still to this day, it's constant. It doesn't drive me crazy, but I don't like silence. I prefer constant background noise. Edit. My husband says I should add I always thought ringing in the ears was a literal ring like a phone ring. Next story. OMG, I used to hate when peers in school found out my siblings are deaf, particularly the absolutely most ridiculous questions you can't fathom, like not even some ignorance, lack of being informed type crap. Just straight up, you should be punched in the throat for that type of questions. But one of the most popular, and by far my favorite, questions/statements was, "Wow, your brother is completely deaf? Your household must be super quiet and peaceful." Well, my friend, you clearly have never, ever been in remote proximity to a deaf person. Usually, especially if they are totally 100% deaf, they cannot hear themselves. So unless you tell them, didn't matter, my brother didn't give 2 craps, they have no idea their volume is not appropriate for the setting. My brother has always been so effing loud. You would have thought there was a party going on in my house at all times. Also, if anyone let him know he was being too loud and asked if he could ever tone it down, just for craps and giggles, he would then proceed to get even louder. Next story. My guy has complete hearing loss in one ear and about 30% loss in the other. He recently got a cochlear implant. He didn't know his sweet, polite girlfriend bickered under her breath or farted in her sleep. I'm gonna have to start minding my manners. Also, he heard our resident owls soft hooting for the first time earlier tonight. He's heard the loud calls, but never the happy little noises they make when they are roosting. Next story. I could always hear a little bit and could hear sizzling bacon. I got a cochlear implant, then I could hear my coke making freaking noise. For some reason, that made me so damn happy. I walked around for an evening with a glass of Coke to my ear. 2, I didn't know mosquitoes were audible. The little effers buzz like bees. And 3, I knew women made noise during sex, but I didn't realize they're so loud. Sometimes I have to throw the implant processor on the bed as it's too hot. I want it to last longer. I also put my hand over a woman's mouth if we might be heard. I can't tell how loud they are, and as far as I know, they don't notice. They don't mind though. Next story. Before cochlear implants, my poor sweet niece never knew farts made a sound. She was 2 or 3 gassing up a storm, and my nephew would laugh hysterically because A, farts are funny to a 5-year-old boy, and B, farts are especially funny to 5-year-old boys when it's coming from their little sister, who has no idea she's loudly ripping up a storm. But my favorite was when my niece discovered that she had the power to turn sound off. When she'd throw a fit and get tired of your crap, no kid wants to be told no, she'd stare you dead in the eyes, take off her processors, and shut herself in her room. It was the ultimate FU from another human, let alone a toddler. She also refused to put her processors on until she had breakfast. She didn't want to deal with anyone's crap, just wanted to eat her breakfast in peace before heading off to preschool. Next story. I'm not deaf, and this isn't answering your question. I just wanted to say I once went on a pub crawl with a big group, and one friend, who was a sign language interpreter, brought a couple of deaf friends along. We went to a really noisy bar together, packed with hundreds of noisy people and loud music. It was super loud, and I was trying to talk to my buddy who can hear. We were screaming into each other's ears, trying to hear each other over all of the noise. Then I noticed a couple of the deaf guys full on having a conversation from across the bar. One was ordering drinks at the bar, and the other guy was sitting at the opposite end of the room, and they were just chatting it up while I continued screaming into my friend's ear. Next story. My grandfather had 80% hearing loss, but was still drafted to Vietnam. He said it was effed up because he saw a soldier going down and everybody ran to hide from something, and he didn't get it until he got shot in the chest. He fell next to the other soldier, and when my grandfather looked at him, there was a bloody hole where his left eye should be. Apparently, there was a mistake during the drafting. There were two guys with the same name. One was ready for combat, and the other has just recovered from a car accident that took 80% of his hearing. They mixed it up, and my grandfather passed through the training by always doing the same thing that the guy in front of him did. But after he was shot, he was sent home. The med thought he lost his hearing during combat. The Vietnam War was weird in every way possible. Next story. So I'll work backwards a bit. I have tinnitus, and I have had it for about 15 to 20 years. I didn't realize it was as bad as it was till last year when I got sick and tried to take my temperature and couldn't hear the beep of the thermometer. I am 41 and I have to have someone take my temperature to get an accurate reading. I'll either take it out too soon and not get accurate, or I'll wait too long and it shuts off before I can read the temperature. It's one thing to have to live with the constant ringing, but it's another to have a physical sign as to how much it has affected me. Next story. I have progression sensory neural hearing loss. It's hereditary from my father's side. I needed hearing aids when I was in high school, but adamantly refused them due to the unnatural electronic way things sounded through them. But I've been wearing them for close to a decade now. My brain has reprogrammed itself to recognize the sounds I hear with the objects producing them. Super cool sciencey crap. I now understand why they call it a clicking mouse, a ticking clock, and how annoying it is to hear someone taking wheezy breaths between the sentences on the radio. That's why your fellow narrator here, as a semi-professional voice actor, tries to have his breaths not as noticeable. Also, I make it easier for the editor. Shout out to the editor, everybody. Anyway, next story. So, at some point in my childhood, back when I had much more powerful hearing aids, I found out that electronics were not silent. I would listen to the electronics of the world around me. Remotes would make a scratch kind of sound when pressed, followed by clicking when held. Car brake lights would click on and off. Buses would have whines of acceleration and deacceleration. Fluorescents, God, they were annoying, would hum when working normally and warble if they were on the verge of failing. Even if they looked okay, they would present visual fluctuations a few days later. Something electronic on an airplane, probably a transponder or running lights, emits a signal or a click that obliterated the background tone drone of the engines every other second. My neighbor has an electrical leak that has been worsening for a few years now. I can hear the hum of his electrical meter from yards away now with my weaker hearing aids. Next story. When I got my first hearing aids, I heard snow for the first time. I also heard the fizzling of food in the oven as it cooks, and the water flowing through the pipes when someone flushed on a different floor than the one that I was on. That's their poop making that noise, I thought? Next story. My wife never, ever knew that bees made a noise until she was in her 20s. And there was one time she heard a pigeon doing that cooing thing that they do. She crapped herself wondering what the F that noise was. When I told her, she stopped and then cut the biggest smile over her face, and she just wanted to sit and listen. Cutest moment ever. Next story. I have partial hearing loss at medium pitch and recently got new hearing aids. I got home from the audiology clinic and it was like all wow at the things I could hear. Making dinner? Jesus effing Christ, does iceberg lettuce really have to be so loud, I thought? It takes a bit of time to get used to hearing everything. It's really tiring. But one of the best feels of the day is taking my hearing aids out and going back into a quiet little bubble. Next story. Oh, something I can actually comment on with experience. I have had hearing aids since I was 2 years old. Back in the 80s when I was born, we had the old analog hearing aids, which were pretty poor at isolating noise. I'm not stone deaf, but I have profound hearing loss of about 70%. For myself, I have the inability to focus on sound. All of it gets rammed down my ears, whether I like it or not. It was around 1993, I was around 8 years old, and I was offered the chance to try digital hearing aids. My childhood audiologist wired me up, did lots of hearing tests to fine-tune them, and then plugged them in for the first time. Something I had never heard before was air conditioning. My mind was blown. One thing I would say to people who can hear, bear with us. We genuinely do not hear you first time. We are not trying to be rude, we're just trying our best to catch what you say. You won't believe how hard it is for us to hear in loud environments, concerts, nightclubs, bars, etc. Many times I have had friends shout at me in general conversation, only for me to say, sorry, didn't catch that. They repeat it again, where we might miss a few things off at the end. And then at the end, they turn around and say, it's all right, mate, it wasn't important. And it makes you feel so deflated. Next story. So my dad always had digital in-canal ones, and then he switched to BTEs, over-ear batteries with in-ear molds. All the background noise that we take for granted was so overwhelming for him. The noise that lifts make as they move, extractor fans, even footsteps. My parents were walking down the corridor after the first fitting, and he heard his own footsteps for the first time. For the month after that, he kept on asking us what certain noises were. It was all a bit much for him, so he decided to lower the sensitivity of the aids and get used to the remaining background sounds. He says the world is so noisy and distracting, it's a wonder anything gets done. Next story. My now ex-husband was diagnosed with congenital hearing loss at age 6. His parents never did anything about it, like getting hearing aids, speech therapy, etc. At the time, he had about 30% hearing in one ear and 10% in the other, which has since declined. Over the years, he mastered lip reading and got through school. I had no idea he was that hard of hearing. He seemed to get on pretty well, and he got hearing aids for the first time at the age of 40. We rode in silence on the way home from the doctor's office because he needed to get used to the road noise. It was very loud to him. Then, when we got out of the car in our driveway, he suddenly stopped walking and shouted, "What is that noise?" We looked down. It was him walking on crunchy fall leaves. He had never heard that sound before. 10 seconds later, he did kind of a duck and cover maneuver. Looked at me kind of freaked out. I was like, what? What's going on? He heard an airplane flying really high overhead. First time he had ever heard an airplane. I didn't even hear it / notice it. I'll tell you though, it makes me tear up just thinking back on that time. He was so happy to learn that birds chirped. He loves that sound. Waves at the beach are his favorite thing. Modern science is amazing, and even though we aren't married anymore, I am so happy for him that he can hear. It's a beautiful thing. Next story. When I was a kid, there were 2 brothers, about 15 years older than me, that were both deaf. The older brother got a cochlear implant in his late 30s, and not long after, his wife told the whole church a story about his reaction. Apparently, the day after he came home from the cochlear implants being, implanted, he was getting dressed and yelled out to his wife, who came running into the bedroom in a panic thinking something was wrong. He then looked up in amazement at her though, and he said to her, "Can you hear your pants when you're putting them on?" And the whole place teared up. It was just the childlike wonder of it. Whoever invented cochlear implants has had an incredibly profound impact on the entire world. Next story. When my cousin got his cochlear implant, he kept searching for a sound in his house that kept going off and on all day long. It was driving him nuts, and no one seemed to hear it either. As it turns out, it was the air conditioner being triggered on and off, and everyone was so desensitized to the noise that they didn't even consider it. He also found out his heat board was magnetic when he leaned back to read for the first time after the implant, and the magnet went from his head and attached itself to the bed. Next story. So I'm friends with a guy who was born almost completely deaf. His family was pretty poor when he was a kid. We all were back then in my town. But until he was in his 30s, he never had anything more than a very old-fashioned hearing aid. It was a box that captured all sound which he wore in his shirt pocket, with wires attached to both earpieces. After being on a waiting list for financial aid, though, he finally qualified and received his new hearing aids. I received 2 emails from him that day, the first before he went for them and the second one after he got them. "Oh my god, I'm so excited, you can't even imagine how long I've waited for this." And then, holy crap. No, really, holy crap, man, I can hear everything. I can hear the water dripping from the air conditioner. I can hear bugs outside. Is that what you hear? It was so amazing, and I was so happy for him. Next story. I worked alongside several deaf people before. We all worked in disability area, but there was different organizations. One day I was talking to a woman in a random conversation about her husband and how he was doing. He did TV captioning. For this particular section, he was writing in sound words for waves hitting different types of shore, like sand, rocks, pedal beaches, etc., adding different words to try to show that they made different noises. And she was astounded. She assumed that there was a noise, but it was the same. She didn't realize that depending on the material the waves hit, the noise would be slightly different. Well, folks, this was an incredibly short but very adorable video, and I hope you went, "Oh, isn't that so nice?" a couple of times throughout the video. And if you're deaf, I suppose you're just watching the entire video. But just know, for the fellow deaf viewers, I have a nice voice. I'm just going to be honest. promise the ladies like it. But on a more serious note, this video has reminded me not to take my hearing for granted because, it can just go like that. Tinnitus, loud music, I don't know, maybe a bomb goes off outside or my car blows up and I go deaf. Wouldn't that be awful? But anyway, guys, thank you all so much for watching, commenting, have a really good day, and bye-bye!